Zambia struck a deal to restructure $6.3 billion in debt owed to governments abroad, including China. And this agreement is seen as a breakthrough for indebted nations around the world that have faced lengthy negotiations with their creditors. The deal, which was agreed between Zambia and a group of bondholders, will allow the country to manage its debt more effectively and reduce the risk of default. Now, Zambia, which became the first African country to default on its sovereign debt, has been struggling with a mounting debt crisis exacerbated by the pandemic and falling copper prices amidst other internal and external economic shocks. It was almost frustrated in protracted discussions to agree to a restructuring deal with bilateral creditors. Now that it has been able to secure a deal to overhaul its debt, does that mean Zambia is finally out of the woods? Well, this morning, before I introduce my guests, let's watch this video excerpt where IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva gave an insight into the restructuring process.
Conclusion on Zambia debt restructuring, with China contributing, as well as South Africa as a vice chair of the creditor committee, with Paris Club participating. This is a breakthrough because of the way the structure of the agreement is being done. And I very much look forward to codifying Zambia and then using it as a model for other. Already over 60 billion of this 100 billion are available to our members through the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust and through the new Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Already this money is flowing on concessional terms, affordable finance to countries that need it. They need it. This is what he's referring to. We have identified broadly parameters how to deepen our cooperation, and we would like to engage more broadly teams to get into the details.
So this morning I have with me Cesar Cheelo, Developmental and Research Economist at COMESA, joining me to talk about this. Thank you so much, Cesar, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So earlier on, you listened to IMF Managing Director Kristalina talking about this particular deal being a success, a breakthrough, and a vista for other countries that are indebted to get a leeway to have their debt overhauled. Now, what do you think about what she said as regards to the restructuring deal?
I think it's a very landmark achievement that Zambia has done, and is really opening up the spaces for other countries to follow suit. I think it was a hard-fought battle to figure out how to align everything. But at the end of the day, Zambia has a deal and sets itself as an example for least developed and developing countries to follow in terms of negotiating for restructuring, because the restructuring is absolutely essential, absolutely necessary for giving the country room to breathe, room to grow its economy, and be able to pay back its debt over a longer period of time.
All right, it's been a bit of relief for the Zambian government with this success, but then let's just go back in time in retrospect and look at how Zambia owed bilateral creditors about $8 billion. What were the factors responsible for the mounting debt for the country in terms of the crisis, the debt crisis? Aside the pandemic, of course, what were other factors that resulted in this huge amount of debt being owed?
Sure. So let's pick up the conversation around 2005, 2006, going back in time. Many people will remember that for many countries that were heavily indebted or highly indebted, they got massive amounts of debt write-offs in terms of HIPIC and MDRI debt forgiveness. For Zambia, that meant that the debt stock, the public debt stock, went from 200% plus of GDP down to about 18-20% of GDP. And this was under a particularly reformist sort of political party in power at the time, the MMT. Then fast forward to 2011, there was a political regime change where a new party came in called the Patriotic Front, and they inherited a very healthy economy, GDP growth 6 to 8% per year, debt stocks, like I said, down to 18%, fiscal deficits in the region of 1.8% of GDP. So the fiscus was very healthy, the economy was very healthy, and at the same time, Zambia had graduated into a lower middle income country, meaning that it was eligible to borrow commercially from commercial markets. So to test the waters, Zambia went to the Eurobond market, issued a Eurobond. The government then was actually looking for $500 million. But guess what? $750 million. So that Eurobond was particularly oversubscribed. A year later, they went back to the markets and picked up $1 billion. And 2 years later, they picked up another $1.5 billion in Eurobonds, basically borrowing simply because they could, not because there was actually a plan to borrow. So as time went on, other creditors also came into the scene, predominantly China came on with both official government-to-government debt, but also a lot of private debt coming online.
All right.
With basically the government ignoring all the warnings from their experts, both local and international, Zambia went into higher and higher risk of debt distress until, with COVID, we just went over the edge, went over the cliff, and defaulted in November 2020.
All right, so it seems that Zambia has actually learned its lessons. And when it comes to facilitating negotiations like this, IMF is always critical about requirements that debtors would need to meet. So what were the major concerns for IMF? What did it take for Zambia to secure the deal? And of course, what was the disposition of the bilateral creditors and others within the discussion table? What were the disposition to these restructuring negotiations and deal before it got struck?
Sure. So starting with the IMF, I think the IMF was looking for two sets of things. One was to see if Zambia was serious enough to be engaging the other creditors. So the IMF as an international financial institution is just one set of, together with the World Bank, is probably just one part of the creditor profile. So the question was, is Zambia talking to its private creditors? And the private creditors you asked about disposition, they said, well, talk to the official creditors as well. If anyone is going to restructure debt, we should be maybe the last ones. So the IMF was requiring just that sentiment from both the official creditors and the private creditors that they would be willing to speak restructuring with Zambia. That was the first thing. The second thing the IMF was looking for was prior actions. What voluntary actions was Zambia taking to show that it was serious about fiscal discipline and debt management? So some of the prior actions that Zambia took was to remove subsidies on fuel and remove subsidies on electricity. Painful process, but those were restructuring moves that were necessary to show that Zambia was willing and able to take initial steps to start containing the fiscal deficits that were coming with some of these subsidies. There was also a requirement to show that Zambia was putting money out of the little public resource that it had on social services, health, education, and so on, rural development. And Zambia, over time, with the coming in of the UPND party, in August 2021, has demonstrated this very strongly. This fiscal discipline, this debt management drive, this drive to engage bilateral and multilateral as well as private creditors and so on to fix the economy from the bottom up, paying pensioners their pensions, increasing constituency development funds, particularly for rural areas. So all those things put together convinced the IMF that Zambia was ready to do business.
All right, so having secured $6.3 billion, now should we expect that Zambia's economy will be stable probably in the next few months or in the next few years? Do we also, should we also expect some sort of reduction in its debt burden, leading to the country getting off the default hook and, of course, helping the country open up its economy for foreign direct investments? Should we expect all this?
Sure. So let's start with the debt burden. The current restructuring, unlike what happened in 2005, 2006, the current restructuring is not debt forgiveness. So it's not writing off the debt, it's lowering the interest rates. So the service burden, the burden of servicing the debt, the burden on interest rates has gone down significantly, because now, as opposed to working out of around 5 to 8% payments in dollar terms, we'll be paying for the next 14 years there about 1% in interest payments. So the debt stock remains. Whatever Zambia owes, it's around, when you combine external and domestic debt, it's around $33 billion.
Okay.
That amount doesn't go away, but you are given a longer time period to pay it off, and you are given lower interest requirements to pay. Okay. And you were mentioning 6.3. That's just the official creditors component. So the next step is for Zambia now to go and re-engage the private creditors, who Zambia owes around $11-12 billion, maybe including arrears. So this step, together with the step that was won when Zambia got onto an IMF deal last year,
okay,
these two steps are just setting the environment for further negotiation and further restructuring.
All right. Thank you so much, Caesar. We are actually pressed for time. I'd love to continue with the discussion, but then we see that this is a first of a positive step being taken by Zambia as it is, and we hope that other African countries will be able to take a cue from this and see how they can get out of their debt hole. Thank you so much, Caesar, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.